Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The Wendigo guy, Ryan Tremblay, has once again made his way into the Fox Den for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Yes, this is going to be an epic Halloween special. Much better. Thank you for allowing me to feast. I do not enjoy candy, but I do enjoy blood. Thank you, Mr. Tremblay, for releasing my shackles and setting me free. It is now time for the Midnight Society to once again read a chapter from our infamous book.
Blow, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, leaves reborn, fury rise, hell's ignite, burdens raise, endless nights.
When I looked into the eyes of this Dogman, there was nothing. This thing was an apex predator.
Road, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, beast
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back once again to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Ryan Tremblay, aka the Wendigo guy, has found his way back into the Fox Den, and this means the Midnight Society has once again gathered to burn the late night fire and oil. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing really well. How are you today?
Just been busy plugging away, editing. You know, Bruins got a huge win earlier. They were on at 1 o'clock, which is way early for me. But hey, you know, sometimes you got to climb out and see the sunlight, I suppose. So.
Absolutely, and not in my case, though. I'm in Arizona. You see the sunlight, you're like, warm. You turn around and you go right back inside.
I turn into dust, like, poof. No, I'm just
kidding. Yeah. Like I was telling you before we started, man, it's 89 right now, and it's 5:37 p.m. my time. How relentless is this heat? Where's that autumn weather?
And to the audience, Ryan was laughing when I told him that my habitat, my room that I really enjoy is right around 75 degrees. It's good stuff.
That's not a room, bro. That's a terrarium, you reptile.
This is great stuff. So, to the audience, you must know who the Wendigo guy is by now. But again, just because, as stated, apparently somebody on one of my short videos thinks I don't introduce my host correct. Well, again, a 1 minute segment out of a 36-minute video. Of course, I'm not going to play the segment where I introduce my host. But again, Ryan, could you please tell everyone what you like to do inside and outside of the whole cryptid thing?
Absolutely. I mean, like my name says, I'm the Wendigo guy, but I'm really big into the indigenous lore. So I'm not just a cryptozoologist, I'm a folklorist as well. And believe it or not, that's where I find a lot of the rabbit holes that we go down, Kenny. You know, because folklore is just chock full of horror stories and monsters, and some of them are very much like the things that are being seen today. You know, and I'm a movie geek. I'm a monster and movie geek. So if there's monsters in it and there's monsters in a movie, Ryan's into it. Ryan's gonna be like, oh, yep, that's my thing. That's my party. Here I am. So yeah, that's who I am right there.
Beautifully stated, my friend, and I could not agree more. And before we dive into what we're gonna dive into tonight, since you are a movie buff, right? I mean, I'm more of a creature feature person too, but come on, this is classic, and it's true. I have no problem, honestly, if people want to peg me as this, say goodnight to the bad guy, because it's the last time you're going to see a bad guy like this. Hey, if people want to get upset that I don't post fake stuff, that I have no problem debunking things and questioning encounters. And if people really want to label myself and the NADP and our science team as the bad guys and girls, because again, we look for the truth, I'm okay with that.
Are you having problems with somebody calling you the bad guys?
It's always just been that narrative. Like you said, man, no one likes the fact that we, like I said, don't buy into the hoaxes and stuff, man. So yeah, people just don't like that are hoaxers, and we all know how that is. There's plenty of them out there. So of course, when you're hoaxing and you know that we're not about that life, well, obviously you're not going to be about our life either, right?
So, here's the thing that people have to understand, and I keep saying this, Kenny. There needs to be a healthy dose of skepticism in this field, okay? We need to have open minds, but not so open that our brains are leaking out, okay? Because if we just believe anything and everything, we're not going to make any progress, all right? So if we get a picture from Peter Kane, all right? I know you know who I'm talking about. Is that evidence? No, that's not evidence. That's called satire. Satire is meant to be a joke, so we can't take that as serious evidence.
Right, my friend. No, and honestly, great, and preach that. Bottom line is, at the end of the day, people want the fake stuff, man. So when you're not about that, and like on our science team, like my friend Robert Prevo, he
Mhm.
specializes in mental health. We have Dennis Carroll. The list goes on. I mean, I could name my whole science team. I've named them numerous times, so I don't need to. Yet they all specialize in things. And
So check this
we're
out.
the
Let me give an example of a really bad hoax, okay? So as you know, I do the indigenous folklore, okay? One of the things that I'm really deep into is the Raven Mocker, okay? Now, according to the Cherokee legend, only certain medicine men can actually see the Raven Mocker. So if you're just a normal person, you can't see it, okay? I had somebody contact me via voice message, and she was insisting that she saw a Raven Mocker, that she saw it, she saw it. Well, there was a problem, Kenny. She wasn't a medicine man. She wasn't even of indigenous heritage. So right there, it's like somebody was purposely lying to get attention. This is what we have to put up with in this field, and that's why they're skeptics.
Again, preach, my friend, and that's why I made that hoax video to show how easily that was able to be hoaxed. And I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
disasters that happened down in Tennessee and Kentucky, everyone's hopefully gonna recover from that. But people are posting these portal shots over the forest. Man, I was like, yo, I don't even have time to waste right now because I am super busy. But wait a second, pull open one of my AI, literally within, I'm not even going to exaggerate, 2 to 3 minutes without even trying, I come up with pretty much the identical image that they're sharing around saying is appearing over Tennessee and Kentucky. It just
Oh,
makes me chuckle. So again, that's just why we're always, people like you, myself, we're always going to be
mhm.
labeled as the bad guys because we
Right,
just don't buy into that stuff, man.
right.
It is what it is.
And it's actually perfect that you mentioned Tennessee. I mean, not to make light of the situation, but what we're going to be talking about tonight actually heralds from Tennessee. It's a Cherokee belief known as the Ulanga Dogala. And this thing you're going to find really interesting, Kenny. I think even your audience is going to be like, wait, what is this thing? So
I mean,
to
usually
describe,
whenever you bring that, man, that's how everyone's reaction is. So before you dive into that, I wanted to ask you a quick question that I've forgotten numerous
yeah.
times. Super huge on Native American culture. I have a lot of Native American friends, man, and if I had to pick a way to live out of anything throughout the past, I would pick a Native American way. All
Yes.
about that stuff. But the question I'm going to ask is a legitimate question that I really would like to know the answers to is that medicine men and women, we do know that they dove in and used some sort of things that we do list as psychedelics and
Mhm.
drugs and such. So again, when they were potentially seeing something, could they also have been hallucinating as well? It's just a legit question.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, if they're taking things like peyote or whatever, then yeah, I mean, sure, they could definitely have hallucinations. But you got to remember too, they were very much in tune with things. So when they had these hallucinations, they did it on purpose. It was a vision quest. So
Okay.
they didn't use peyote or hallucinogenics on their regular thing. It wasn't like they decided, oh, I'm going to get high today. So it was always a medicinal thing that they would use on certain occasions. But during those
Okay.
occasions, yeah, I'm sure they did see hallucinations, but not 24/7. No.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Besides, like I said, I mean, I don't have one of my Native American friends right now, but you would be pretty much right up there with knowledge about that. So, no, I appreciate that answer. And I'm actually going to throw the mic right back at you, man, and let you blow some people's mind, including myself.
Okay, so I'm going to describe this thing to you, and then I'm going to add something at the end that I want your opinion on, okay? So, the Olunga Dogata, okay, the Caucasian settlers called it the long dog. And the reason why they called it a long dog is because when it was outstretched, it was about maybe 5 to 6 to even 7 feet long. Okay, when this thing ran, it had a Wolverine lope, which means it has a bouncy kind of run, kind of like an inchworm. And it had black fur that wasn't shiny. It was very greasy, oily, matted, sometimes even really foul smelling. It had glowing red eyes that they could see in the night. So they knew when the Olunga was around because they would look off into the night sky or the night trees and they would see the eyes moving about. So they're like glowing red, like maybe an orangish red or a bright crimson. And according to the lore, this thing had bad breath that smelled like sulfur. Okay. Now, what it would do is it would pick off individual braves that were roaming around. And what it would do is it would pace them. It would follow alongside them. And when they stopped, it stopped. When they started moving again, it started moving again. That kind of sounds like some modern day Bigfoot and Dogman encounters, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does a ton right there. And also, it makes me think that potentially with the whole sulfur thing,
Mm-hmm.
it also, like Dennis Carroll and I were diving into it a little bit, is, and you and I should talk about this at some point. There's a good 12 to 20 supposed cursed books that allow you to speak to the crispy man himself to Lilith, lesser
Ugh.
demons, supposedly angels. There are ways where you're able to manifest these winged entities that look like Jersey devils and also shadow figures and supposed
Mm.
vampires and werewolves, etc. And they have that like smell to them, which makes me wonder potentially if that was something maybe that was manifested. Meaning, I don't know much about demonology and the occult. It's interesting in regards of how it ties into werewolves for sure.
Right.
Yet everyone talks about the smell of like sulfur, man, with whether it's hellhounds or what you're speaking about right now, or some of the more entity based things that might be werewolves, not dogmen and such. So that's just really interesting.
You could be onto something there, though, Kenny, because Ulanga Dogara, what it means in the Cherokee tongue is the spirit with knife teeth. Okay, so this thing would just pop up, it appear in certain patches of the woods along the Holston River. And they would see it, and this thing would attack a brave or two. It would disappear again. Then it would show up again, then disappear, then show up, then disappear. So it kind of was like playing a cat and mouse game with a Cherokee tribe, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. And this is where I kind of looked at it going, okay, this isn't a dogman, it's not a werewolf. So yeah, it did take on a bipedal canine form, but its other form that it had was it became a human-like zombie. So what do you think of that, Kenny? I mean, this thing went from wolf to human zombie.
As you're just talking all about that, it was kind of unfolding into my head a little bit of what if it was a medicine man or a woman that had issues maybe with that tribe and that cast some sort of
Yeah, it's
spell on them, or
see?
also had potentially dove into themselves, maybe the skinwalker aspect, and maybe that was them taking on this form or they had summoned it. And that could, I guess, explain the random appearances and the picking them off one by one, etc. I don't know.
Now
That just kind of popped into my head.
now you're seeing why I got into this one a lot because it's got a lot of analogies and comparisons to the Skinwalker. So could it be a medicine man? Sure, it could be. I mean, I don't know the Cherokee equivalent to the Yinatalushi, but it does sound a lot like it.
And no matter what, even if, obviously each indigenous tribe, it's similar, but obviously there are some differences. So potentially, though, even if the Navajo might have called it, say, skinwalker in another culture of indigenous tribal base, might not have, it still seems to be they would have had to practice the similarities of doing the same messed up stuff, because I mean you have the Nordics with the Vikings that
That's
report
true.
basically skinwalker like things where you have to do messed up stuff, werewolves and summoning like in some of those books, which I have no desire to get near or read. I just watched some stuff on History Channel where some of the occult people were talking about it.
Oh,
Well,
you got to
same
be so
thing.
careful with books like that, dude. Anything you read, you got to be so careful with because some of those words you don't know what those words stem from and how they're used. So they could be incantations, and you wouldn't even know it.
Yep, and that's what's happened to some people that were able to apparently translate some of it had misfortune. One book was
Hmm.
found to have two different variations with spelling errors, which means it was actually even older than those texts. And then one of the texts, the guy couldn't sell it anywhere, finally sold it. It was on the trip over on the Titanic. It sunk. And
Oh my goodness.
yeah, so a
Wow.
lot of these occult books, The Dirty Stash, which you should know who that is, Heinrich Himmler and the occult and all them during World
Yes.
War II, there's
Yes.
a high probability, man. All those books they had their hands on more or less because any area where there was rumored to be terrifying occult activity, whether it was Castle Hauska, where that castle is built and pointed inward, supposedly over a gate that lets out dark entities. There's no running water there. There's no way to defend the castle from the outside. It's in the middle of nowhere in really rough terrain, but everything is directed inside in this huge, deep black hole.
Yeah.
And
So
guess who was there? Heinrich Himmler. The occult with all those books, it just makes me interested because as to what you're saying now, again, this still describes very similar stuff as the Native American lores, even though they would have never had a chance to read those books. So
true.
even though we're speaking about Islamic depictions of this, Hebrew, Nordic, I mean, it doesn't matter, dude. It all talks about the same kind of screwed up stuff that you need
Yeah.
to doing, which is really interesting because it's all summoning things, whether it looks like I said, a Jersey Devil,
Hmm.
a quote unquote werewolf, or winged entities, shadow figures. So
Yep.
it's bizarre, man.
Yeah, so I do have a theory with the Ulanga, and you kind of touched upon it briefly. But when I did my Yinalushi studies, I found out that the Dene, the Navajo versions of them, they need those four sacred mountains, okay? So if they're without those four sacred mountains, they start losing their power. So maybe this Ulanga Dogata was actually a Yinalushi at some point, but he or she was forced to retreat from, Arizona or Mexico or New Mexico and ended up in Tennessee. And that would be really far away from the four sacred mountains. So maybe the fact that they were seeing a human-like zombie, that's the effect that it has. When it's away from its power source, maybe it starts to eat away at its human body. And maybe that's why it looks like ragged shape when it was in its canine form, because it doesn't have its power source. And it's operating on, residual power, basically, more or less.
Straight up gnarly stuff right there. And you actually might find this interesting because this could probably potentially tie into that.
Hmm.
Our science team and I and some others were talking about maybe skinwalkers might be able to distort things and show us something that we might not actually really be seeing. Meaning, there were two police officers. There's this road down in Arizona. It's like a stretch of highway, I believe, that is supposedly like super haunted and has like really strange sightings of skinwalkers and all these things around it.
Which
And
road
these
is it? Because I know Roller Coaster Road here in Arizona is supposed to be very haunted.
I don't fully know. I'll have to find it out for you because it's in my book, man. But I know these two officers had been called there from people that were reported driving down this road and having this strange looking like wolf creature chasing after their car and also
Oh
seeing what
boy.
looked to be a decaying elderly Native American man. So
Mm-hmm.
these two officers are like, ah, crap, man, we hate this dang road, dude, but we're the ones that are on right now. We have to go, dude. So they're driving down this stretch of it's like a freeway highway kind of, and they're going slow down it and they're just shining their light everywhere. And they're going about 10, 15 miles per hour.
It's
They're not seeing anything, so they have their lights still on and they're just driving slow. All of a sudden, the guy that's driving, his passenger officer is just speaking to him. He looks over, and the guy that's driving is just not even listening to him, just looking out the side of the window, not paying attention. I mean, they're driving slow, but just absolutely shocked. So the guy looks over and they see this wolf-like creature literally beside their
yikes.
car, just keeping pace, looking as if it's grinning. So they start to speed up a little bit, and this thing keeps pace for a while before they end up pulling off. But here's where it gets weird. As they make distance away and they look back, they see what looks to be an elderly Native American man after. And there's another case as well where two soldiers over in Germany were watching what seemed to be the border of this base, and they again saw what looked to be like a wolf creature. And then as they started backing up and it came closer to them, all of a sudden it looked like an elderly native man with glowing eyes. That's why I had
Wow.
asked potentially if maybe it's making us think that's what it is, and it might not fully be in that wolf form, or it might actually be the elderly man with the glowing eyes the whole time.
Yeah, so according to the Navajo lore, that's what the Narushi do. They get in your head and they mess with you. That's why, they'll try to use the voice of a dead relative to try to lure you out because they can read your thoughts. So it only follows logic that if they wanted to scare you, they're going to make you see something that's not really there. Because humans, we react, okay? We see something or hear something that terrifies us, then, we're about having heart attacks. We're having kittens and massive coronary hell at the same time. And a skinwalker would know that. They're well practiced, well versed at what they're doing. So if they want to scare an individual or a group of people, then yeah, they would get inside their heads and make them see something that's not really there. They'd be playing off of their fears, almost like the Freddy Krueger kind of syndrome, where whatever you're most afraid of, Freddy's going to make you see it in your nightmares.
Which again, I think really distinguishes the differences of when people see a dogman, it's either
Mhm.
taking you or it's observing you. But I'm starting to really think when something's running beside the car like that, purposely smiling, or when it's looking in and starts tapping its nails and such, that makes me think skinwalker or werewolf a little bit more, meaning
Yeah.
that it's got that intellect in regards of, I mean, dogmen are smart too. They're setting traps and things, but I'm just saying, as you just stated, the human aspect just brings a little bit more commonness to you and I than a dogman might cut you slack, meaning, I don't know, it's not really worth my time right now. Okay. But I think the skinwalkers and the werewolves and such know exactly what they're doing. They could obviously get you at any point in time, but they're screwing with you. Whereas I don't think a dogman is going to consistently come back like that and just tap on your
No.
window.
No, I think that's what makes them so terrifying to us too, is the human-like intelligence. It's almost along the lines of the uncanny valley, where if something looks more human, it's more terrifying. But I think when
Yes.
something behaves or even thinks more human, that makes it terrifying for us because now we have that knowledge that, okay, we're not smarter than it. For all I know, it's smarter than me because we don't know the full range of their intellect, their full range of the IQ. So we're guessing how smart they are. I mean, they could be smarter than us. And so when you're dealing with something like that, it's almost like you're stuck in a horror movie. Like you're that poor victim stuck inside the house.
And you're going to actually enjoy this quote too, that a member of our science team and a good friend of mine, May Koo, sent us. And it's by a forest ranger at Yosemite National Park. Okay. And he says, it's very hard to design the perfect garbage bin to keep bears from breaking into it. There is a considerable overlap between the intelligence of the smartest bears and the dumbest tourists.
That's great. That is great. Wow, I like that.
But it applies to, like I said, again, with anything where we, for some reason, think we're smarter. I hate to break it to people, man. All these people that get attacked by predators and that are going missing, or whatever did that was smarter.
Yeah, yeah, and with this Ulanga Dogala though, I think that there was a human-like intelligence to it because they did send out hunting parties. The Cherokees did send out hunting parties to find anything, but it was losing them at every turn. They would think that they had it cornered. They'd follow into a valley or into a group of trees where they thought, haha, we got them, and this thing would outsmart them somehow and it would disappear. So there's obviously a very strong intelligence with this Ulanga Dogala as well. So I mean, I think what you said about the whole skinwalkers and the Dogala being related, I think you could really be onto something there.
Straight up terrifying stuff. And also, as I'm thinking about that more, I mean, growing up, Sasquatch and stuff, obviously, is super cool, but it's not something I really, delve into too much. But there is some really interesting ingredients to potentially support a lot of different hypotheses and theories about it.
Sure.
But let's just, go with this one particular one, saying it was either a missing link or even a subdivision of humans, like a Neanderthal that might not have evolved as much as us, or whatever. Either way,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's going to have that type of intelligence. Same thing with like the
Sure.
cynocephali. I mean, if the cynocephali were making swords and armor, okay, and taking on the Greeks and Romans and fighting with them, they're obviously smart. Yet,
Yes.
yes, okay, so there's that type of intelligence right there on both sides
Mm-hmm.
that shows you a difference now between then like just a animal intelligence too, which is also smart. But I don't think you're gonna be able to. You can. All right. At the end of the day, man, if you put enough time in, it's sad but true. Any animal in the world can be caught, whether it's an orca, whether it's a gigantic wolf, a tiger. At the end of the day, it's sad but true. If you invest enough time into it, you will get an animal. But
Sure,
when it
you have
comes,
to learn its patterns, though. I mean, learning what it does on that daily basis, its routine, that would be fundamental in catching anything.
but then when it comes to Sasquatch and cynocephalites and stuff like that, and say like the skinwalkers, I don't think you're going to be able to catch them now because they have that similar mindset as a hominoid,
Mhm.
either because one is, or skinwalkers are, or cynocephali seem to be the equivalent.
Right.
So I don't think you're going to be able to just catch those. Whereas if it was a giant wolf or hyena that's terrorizing you, eventually you're going to catch the hyena, you know?
Right, exactly. With this Ulanga Dogala, though, the Cherokee talk about how it left footprints. So you would see these massive footprints that it would leave in the muds along the river, but then it would disappear. Or if somebody tried to shoot it with a bow and arrow, it was like the arrow went right through the thing, that it didn't cause any harm to its physical body at all. So something like that. I mean, would I want to catch something like that? Absolutely not. I mean, dude, I'd rather catch a Bigfoot than a skinwalker. Maybe I sound like a coward with that, but I wouldn't even know what to do with a skinwalker, bro. I'd be like, okay, I caught you. Now what? What am I supposed to do? I'm so
No,
confused.
straight up, right? And that's some creepy stuff right there for sure. Because again, I don't know the most about ghosts and occult, but
Mhm.
if it's disappearing like that, well, most likely it does not seem to be something of physical form if they're again shooting at it and it's not applying damage. That's like some of the
Right,
stuff where at Skinwalker Ranch, people or one of the families claim they saw what looked to be a dog man wearing a quote unquote trench coat smoking a cigarette. Bizarre. And another family on there claimed that this Dogman werewolf looking like thing came out, that they shot at it, it literally blew a huge portion of its ribs and side meat off, didn't even acknowledge it, walked and just kind of pretty much vanished. So,
wow.
okay, obviously that one blew it, but it didn't really cause any sort of damage to it. That again makes me not really think it's totally physical, because anytime that there has been physical ones where someone say hit it with a car, I mean it spun
Right,
around and it gimped off for a second, or when someone in Kingston, New York shot it in the chest and blew half of its chest off, it like
right,
screamed, spit blood out. I mean, there's a super old case with a dog man where this guy basically with like a sharp stick slash spear, a farmer, didn't even really, he just actually got lucky. He impaled it with its own weight when it came on him, but he unalived it, which means he hit it in a soft spot. Those all seem like physical things right there, but I don't know. I mean, from what I understand, I guess if you put down salt and stuff like that, you
hmm
can see ghost tracks. Would a ghost be able to leave tracks out in the mud like that, though, showing like a weight distribution and things? I don't know enough about that.
I think it depends. I honestly believe there's an interdimensional slip to a lot of these things. Okay, maybe not so much Bigfoot or Dogman all the time, but I think there is a slippery slope that we're dealing with here. I think some of them, not all of them, are something we're manifesting. Okay, and I think that at times these manifestations have so much energy that yeah, they can leave footprints, but then that energy wears off and it tapers off, and eventually they disappear. It goes along the lines of the tulpa that when we think about something enough, our thoughts have energy. Our thoughts are energy. So, it goes into something. And if we're focusing on topics too much, then who's to say we can't create these beings? I mean, look at, pre creepypastas. Nobody was seeing the Slender Man or the Rake. But when that came out, suddenly everybody and their uncle is seeing these things. And it's because people became so obsessed with this stuff. They became so obsessed with Slender Man and the Rake, that thought energy had to go somewhere. So, yeah, I think that we can create these things with our mind. They're here temporarily. They leave footprints, they leave claw marks, and then poof, they're gone. That's why we can't find them again.
Man, straight up bizarre right there as well. And I can add a little bit more frosting to that too. Ernie Davio was telling me about at a point in time there was a psychologist that pretty much came up with what he wanted to do as it was a test,
Right.
meaning he claimed some of his patients were seeing this figure that was quote unquote visiting them in their dreams. Well, all of a sudden, a bunch of his other patients started seeing this figure, and everyone else started seeing this figure, yet it never existed because he created that thought.
So it was a mass hysteria kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's super interesting, like you were just saying, more or less about how we can plan a thought, and
Hmm.
for some reason, people just run with it. And I mean,
It's
I'm
true.
sure not everybody, ran with it, but enough people ran with it that his quote unquote experiment was successful. And he had to come out and be like, dude, this was just an experiment. This never happened. I never had a patient saying they saw this.
And we see it all the time in the cryptid world, Kenny. I mean, years ago, people weren't saying that Bigfoot could cloak. They weren't saying that they were Nephilim, but then one person said it and all of a sudden it took off like a rocket and all these other people are saying it now. So you're hearing all these cloaking Bigfoot encounters and all this weird woo kind of stuff. And that wasn't there years and years ago. So that goes to show you how one person's thought can really take off and turn into something.
It's true, my friend. And it's unfortunate, but it's just the reality of the situation about how, some person says one thing and then somehow it turns into this. And
Hmm.
again, it all boils down just to how, at the end of the day, certain people just want to always control the narrative. And that's why I don't join groups that don't allow members to post, because, again, whoever's running those groups is controlling the narrative because they're the only ones that are allowed to post. And I'm not about that stuff. And also, again, just in general, people want to not answer questions. Ape Canyon, for example, for some reason gets this super clean pass as such an epic event. Well, little do people want to pay attention, just like in everything else, the truths behind that. Well, those miners were having luck in that area, getting gold and such. Those
Hmm.
miners were having luck hunting every time that they were up there, getting plentiful amounts of deer and things. So right there, are those not two blaring reasons to keep your area under wraps and not want people up there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, the
And
gold
then
alone,
there,
I mean, come on,
yes,
man.
the gold alone. And then there was a landslide that hit and quote unquote destroyed their little treehouse cabin, yet they thought they were under attack by these apes, yet there was a landslide that was documented. So again,
Ah.
there's a lot of red flags with that, but wait, everyone still wants to bring that up, kind of like the Gable film, and be like, yeah, man, these apes throwing these rocks at the cabin, yet there's so many reasons as to why that's a hoax.
Hmm. Well, people have romanticized this field, Kenny. I think you've noticed that they want to believe, and they will find any little thread to pull on in order to make that belief true. And I've been guilty of it myself, but we do have to look at the facts. We can't just look at what we want and then ignore the rest. That's called cherry picking, okay? We have to look at the whole story and see if it adds up. If it doesn't gel, it's not jello, so you can't go ahead and be like, oh, well, it's slightly gelling up, so some of the facts matter. No, you need all the facts. You need 100% all the details, and then you use your critical thinking and go from there.
Excellently stated again. And before we let you go, that's something that William, one of our scientists, preaches about, how there's good science and bad science, meaning
Yes.
a good scientist and a good journalist and such. Well, yes, you want to create hypotheses and theories, but you don't create ones that you want necessarily to be true. You
Right.
create those off of the evidence that's being presented. And guess what? Your hypothesis might be not something you want to be true, but the evidence is stating, hey, it is true. But then you have the bad science where they're making and bending things to fit into their narrative and ignoring other things that would distinguish why it doesn't belong in that narrative. And it's kind of like, well, yes, certain things you need degrees in and college education. Yes,
Yes.
understandable. But also, a lot of that other information is still plentifully out there without the one-sided narrative that a professor might be giving you that might be biased towards a certain
Right.
topic.
Right. At that point, it's no longer a theory. It's hopeful and wishful thinking. That's what that is. It's not theory or conjuncture anymore at that point.
Yes, my friend. So that's why it's just super important to always, pick from everything and make sure that you're, learning and actually gathering the subjective and objective information. I mean, it's no different than, I am a big sports person, dude, a hockey guy, but I do play fantasy football with my little brothers. Everyone should know
Right.
what that is. Long story short is you try to gauge the point spreads of what your players are going to project out there.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, when you're in there like doing that stuff too, same thing. you are using your projections and things, but it's kind of like a guessing game in regards of, well, these stats are saying this and this is saying this. But moral of the whole story is I don't just watch ESPN because we play for money. I watch ESPN, I watch Fox's sports stuff, I watch NBC's sports stuff, and I see what they're all picking. Okay. I don't just roll with, I love Mina Kimes on ESPN, but just because she says, the Falcons are going to beat the Buccaneers, man, I look into the other people as well before I just roll with that. So it's no different
As you
than,
should.
yeah, with educational aspects out there. Just because someone's presenting something to you, do your own research on it because that individual might not even have meant to, but they could be leaving out information that they weren't informed about. So,
So you don't pull a Deadpool and make an educated wish.
yeah, exactly. That doesn't work for most of us. So.
Smart move, Kenny. Very smart move, man.
So I appreciate you popping in tonight, man, and
Hey,
hanging
my
out with
pleasure,
us
brother.
again. So it's always great, and I look forward to linking up again here in a few weeks because a lot of people, like I said, just don't want to really do the research and actually find out the
No.
truth about things, man. And the information's out there, things are distinguished, and we can't just keep on putting stuff into the same pot and thinking that we can, cook it all up into some massive four-headed cryptid. I mean, we got to make sure these things are separated properly.
Very well said, brother. Very well said.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm, and I will catch you very soon.